A couple of months ago, my family visited another church in the area because a family member of ours works at that church, not because they're looking for a new church, as far as I know, at least. And when they were done with that experience, I met up with them and I asked them about that experience and what they thought about it. And one of my kids jumped in right away and said, "Dad, it was so loud and it was so bright and I didn't like it. I like our church better." And although I was very pleased to hear that I've convinced my kids that we have the best church, we did have some conversation later about the difference between style and content and that kind of thing. And there was actually a lot about that church they really enjoyed. And I would never want to disparage stylistically another church. I think that there's a million ways to do this, and they're pretty much immoral in the way that a church would go about doing what they do. But it reminded me that there is a reason why we do what we do here. It reminded me of the origin story of why our church sort of looks and feels the way that it does. And I kind of filed that away and thought, at the right time, I'll remember, hopefully, to share it with all of you, because some of you are new, and some of you haven't heard some of this in a while. And I want you to know why we are the way that we are. It's not by accident. It's certainly not really aligned with my personality. I'm actually a fairly intense person. By personality, not I'm not a very imposing person. These are children's clothes, let's be honest. I'm not, my presence is not very not very imposing. But my personality, I can be very intense, and I can be a little much if I'm not careful. I have to kind of remind myself to dial it back. But our church service and our church experience and our church culture is actually quite a bit more mild and meek, and that's all intentional and that's all on purpose. Years ago, before we started this church, I worked at another church that had a very opposite sort of approach to a worship experience. And that church put millions of dollars and countless staff hours and efforts into creating something that was highly stimulating and highly engaging. And the reasoning for doing that was very pure. They believed that their responsibility, same as my responsibility or our responsibility on a Sunday here, was to connect God to people and to connect people to God. That's a really special and really sacred thing. And they were going after and trying to capture and sort of bottle this experience that many of you, if not all of you, have had at a live show or maybe at a movie or something like that, where you felt connected to the people around you, and you felt connected to the people on stage, and you felt connected to yourself in a way that you hadn't ever experienced before. And the church that I used to work at was trying to do that every Sunday, help people connect with God in a unique way every single week. That was their way of doing it. And there was nothing wrong with that. But for some reason, I would leave every single week with adrenal fatigue. I'm just tanked from this experience. And I really didn't understand what was going on. And I thought it was me. I would ask people if they were having the same experience, and they would maybe ask a question about the strength of my faith, or they would say something along the lines of maybe calling into question whether or not I was quote unquote in tune with the Spirit. And so I just kind of thought it was a problem with me. And then one day I realized, mostly in interacting with my kids, that these were very intense environments. And my kids, like some of your kids and some of you, in fact, come from a traumatic background, and they're not able to receive and process stimuli the way many of us are. They simply can't do it. And so they go into a bigger, more intense church experience, and they experience something that produces basically a cortisol dump for their brain, and they enter into a fight, flight, or freeze mode. So for those of you who don't have that kind of experience in a really intense and entertaining sort of environment, imagine for a minute walking into a church, a place that's supposed to be welcoming, a place that's supposed to be accommodating, and a place that's supposed to be safe, and feeling immediately on your heels. Imagine that. Now imagine feeling that way week in and week out. A lot of people, like my kids, feel that way about churches, and feel that way about schools, and feel that way about playgrounds, and feel that way about the world. It's scary and it's intense. And so we decided we would try to create something that was less intense, that was a place of rest for you and a place of rest for me. And full disclosure, this was completely selfish in the beginning. I needed a break from that. My family needed a break from that. Our lives are surrounded by chaos. And it's true for you as well as for us. This morning, I was in my office for a bit, and then I came home to check on the family before I came here to get some things set up. And about an hour or an hour and a half before the service started, two of my kids had separate ideas to make two separate things for community lunch after the service, and had cookbooks open, still in their pajamas, and they were starting to take things out of cupboards and had preheated the oven. I mean, there was a lot happening. And Julie's trying to manage this absolute chaos in our house. And meanwhile, the dog's doing something, and our other kids are doing something else, and just getting yourself ready to get out the door when that kind of chaos is happening is stressful. And so why would I want to create an environment that only adds exhaustion to myself or to my family? And again, that for a lot of people, that works, and they're looking for that. This room would be filled with thousands of people if this was for everybody. I know that. I know it's not for everybody, but it's certainly for us. It's certainly for our family, and I think it's for you too, because you're experiencing more and more information and stimulation every single day, and it's happening at an exponential rate. According to a report by the University of California, San Diego, the average American consumes 34 gigabytes of data and information every day. This is estimated to be the equivalent of 100,000 words heard or read every day, or about how many words in Tolkien's The Hobbit every day. According to the Wonder article where I got this information from, here's what else you could do with that much data. You could stream every episode of Stranger Things. You could play over 15,000 hours of Fortnite. You could scroll for 94 hours through TikTok. We are exposed to so much information and stimulation on a daily basis. And it has happened at such an exponential and increasing rate that our brains, from a developmental and from an evolutionary standpoint, have not been able to catch up. We are not able to process a lot of the information and stimulation that we encounter on a daily basis. And there's really nothing that can be done about slowing that sort of thing down unless you are willing to interrupt the pattern. Unless you are willing to interrupt the flow of stimulation and the flow of information into your life. And so today we're going to talk for just a few more minutes about rest and retreat and the very, very significant importance of those items in not just your physical, emotional, mental, relational health, but your spiritual health. God cares about your whole being. God cares about your mental health, and God cares about your relational health, and God cares about your vocational health, and all of these elements that make up who you are. And in a way, all of those things combined together make up your spiritual health. Or another way to look at it might be that all of those spheres that make up who you are overlapped and intertwined, and they cannot be separated or mutually excluded from each other. You are a complex and whole being, and you need a break. You need rest. You need to remove yourself from some of these patterns that keep coming at you over and over and over again. And our little drop in the bucket, our hopeful little contribution to that rest for you is this thing we pull off on Sunday mornings for about an hour. And we hope that it contributes to rest. But the core of this method, the core of this way that we go about this isn't just my reaction to an exhausting experience in the past. And it's not just because my family was sort of desperate for it. It also, really at its core, it has become a value for us because of some words from Jesus. Jesus says this thing at the end of Matthew chapter 11 that beautifully encapsulates Jesus' persona, Jesus' point, Jesus' plan. What Jesus was out to do, set out to do for the people of God, and for us even 2,000 years later. This is so much at the core of what Jesus was doing, and it has become an important kind of like B-side value for us as a church. It goes like this: "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Rest is a vital part of following the way of Jesus. It is a significant and important and natural byproduct, I would say, from following the way of Jesus. If our lives are becoming less restful, more chaotic, more exhausting, I would say that the reason for that is probably not because of following Jesus. Or if it is, then I would say there's a different way that I'd like to invite you to consider following the way of Jesus. I think it's important to note that these words from Jesus come after quite a bit of rebuke in Matthew chapter 11. In fact, it mirrors some sections in the book of Revelation that we refer to as the woe statements. Like Jesus is like, woe to this church, or woe to that person, or like basically like it's going to be a problem for them because they keep doing this, this, and this. So Jesus has come down hard on some people in this chapter, and then we hear these words about rest and ease. And it's important to note that these two things can happen side by side, that we can be challenged, we can be sharpened, we can grow, we can have difficulty in our life and experiencing a pattern of rest and a rhythm of recuperation at the exact same time. John Mark Comer likes to talk about the difference between a podium Olympic athlete and a regular Olympic athlete. I'm not sure there's any such thing as a regular Olympic athlete. You know, these people are freaks, right? Like what they're able to do, it's insane. But the difference is not a factor of how hard they trained. The difference in standing on the podium or competing, or just competing in the Olympics, if you can use the word just there, is a factor of rest. The people who stand on the podium at the Olympics got more and better quality rest than anybody else who competed. That's true time and time again, and it's the primary deciding factor between the two. We can be challenged. We can be sharpened. We can be elite even in whatever it is you want to be elite in, and still have a pattern and a rhythm of rest in our lives. And in fact, I would say that that's vital. It's vital to success in whatever area of success you're pursuing, but it's also vital to our spiritual health. And Jesus says something really interesting in that statement that I think gets overlooked a lot. He says, learn from me. Learn from me. And it's a reminder that Jesus is both the mode and the model, right? Both the mode and the model. The mode by which we experience and are saved by and changed by the love of God. Okay, the means by which that happens, but also the model for how to live out of that. Mode and model. Mode, means by which we get to experience it, but the model for how to go about that. The methodology, like the way we're actually going to go stylistically through this life like Jesus. And so it reminds us to look at the life of Jesus and really simply ask, well, what did he do? Very simply, what did Jesus do, and what can we do as we model our lives after Jesus? Well, very simply, Jesus had a rhythm and a pattern in his life of retreating from chaos and experiencing sleep. Sleep doesn't get talked about, I don't think, often enough, but it definitely doesn't get talked about often enough in church. I don't think we ever talk about it in church. Some of you are sleeping, right? I'm just kidding. We talk about sleep in general, like physical health circles, maybe mental health circles, but not in like spiritual health circles. But if it is true, and I believe that it is, that your mind and your body and your spirit and your relationships, these are all interconnected and intertwined with each other, then your physical health and your mental health have a bearing and an impact on your spiritual health. And so I'm here to tell you that by using Jesus as a model, I'm recommending that you get more sleep. And I'm recommending that you get better sleep. There's this story that comes to mind where Jesus is on a boat, and you probably know the story right away. There's a huge raging storm all around him, and Jesus calms the storm supernaturally. And it's an amazing story, and you read it, and you're like, that's incredible. Jesus has control over the environment, like the weather. That's incredible. But there are two other things that happen at the beginning of that story that I think are really worth noting and so important. The first is this. The reason why they were in the boat to begin with is because they were retreating from chaos. The crowds were on the shore, and they were trying to get to the other side of the lake where things were going to be more calm, and they were going to get a chance to take a beat and take a minute to rest and relax before they went back into probably a very similar environment. There's this pattern in Jesus' life of leaving the crowds, which is so weird to us because we're like, wait a minute, like you only had a few years to like tell everybody your message and to get the word out, and you kept leaving all these crowds, these people who were, there to like listen to you. So there's a pattern of retreating from chaos. But the second thing that happened is Jesus falls asleep on the boat, and isn't just sleeping on the boat, is sleeping so soundly and so well that they have to shake him awake. The storm doesn't wake him up. His friends have to shake him awake so that he'll stop the storm, so that he'll calm the storm. Sleep is happening. Sleep is high enough quality, and the sleep is happening in a way that it's an example to not just his friends who are there on the boat, but the story is told time and time again to you and to me. And so we get to experience this story as a model. Jesus, remember, not just as a mode, but also a model. Unfortunately, studies are showing that sleep for us is getting worse and worse. It's been true for a while, but has been exacerbated and accelerated by the pandemic, where people were drinking more alcohol, consuming more screen time, and worrying more than they ever had before, all three of which contribute to lower quality sleep and lower quantity sleep. There's a huge cost nationwide and worldwide to our sleep problem. The U.S. has the highest annual economic loss due to insufficient sleep in the world, with up to $411 billion lost per year. Each year, about 100,000 deaths occur in U.S. hospitals due to medical errors. Sleep deprivation has been shown to be a significant contributor to this. Sleep problems are costing us in the form of money, lives, and health, and I would say it's impacting our spiritual health as well. So when we talk about growth spiritually, when we talk about employing rhythms that sharpen us and challenge us and shape us in the way of Jesus, I don't know that you've ever considered sleep being one of those, but I believe that it plays a significant role. Well, my wife and I used to work at a camp. We met at this camp, actually, in Durango. And if you've ever been a part of camp culture, you know that it is fast-paced. It's like 20 hours a day. You don't sleep at all. You're moving all the time. You're in charge of, like, making it the most amazing, like, incredible, memorable experience that these kids have ever had. And it's an exhausting endeavor. It's exhausting. And this guy named Pete, who worked at this camp with us, pulled me aside one day and he said, "You look exhausted." And I was like, "Yeah, man, everybody's exhausted. Like, have you been here?" And he was like, "You look exhausted, and I think you should probably go get some rest." And I was like, "I don't think we're supposed to do that." And he was like, "Well, I'm in charge, and I'm telling you, like, you need a nap." And he said, sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is take a nap. And this is like, I don't know, 15 years ago, 30 years ago? I don't have any idea. It was a long time ago. But I will never forget that conversation. I forgot how long ago it was, but I'll never forget that conversation with Pete where he said, "Hey, man, sometimes that's the most spiritually beneficial thing you can do." He said, you're going to go, you're going to get some rest, you're going to come back, you're going to be more rejuvenated, you're going to be able to interact with these campers in a different way. You're going to be able to have more meaningful and higher quality spiritual experiences for yourself and for them because you are more rested. And he convinced me, and I took a nap somewhere, I don't know, in the woods or whatever. I mean, like, you can't nap at camp. That's kind of the joke of the whole thing because it's always so loud and so crazy. But finding a place to do that was extremely important, and it was great advice. And I haven't forgotten that. Jesus found time and places to rest, to sleep, to eat, to bathe, to take care of himself, to take care of his friends. This is a vital part of Jesus living as a full and complete human being and pursuing a healthy life as a human being. Jesus is the mode for the way we which experience the love of God and the model by which we live that out, the model by which we live our lives. If you're interested in finding out more scientifically about sleep and the importance of it, you could pick up Matthew Walker's book, Why We Sleep. You could also find him talking on various interviews, including the Huberman Lab podcast, which we've referenced in here before, about sleep. He's also got a TED Talk about sleep. He's kind of the sleep guru right now, so he's the guy to listen to. But what I'd love to leave you with is some suggestions for ways you can implement rhythms of rest and retreat in your life that I think will have a great and significant spiritual impact on you and the people around you. If we want to follow the way of Jesus together and we want to increase in not only generosity and not only increase in the way that we love our neighbors, but also increase in our health, laying a healthy foundation so that we can do all of those things better, more effectively, and more efficiently. It starts with the way that we care for ourselves. A lot of the rhythms we're talking about in this series right now are resetting for ourselves a base and a foundation so that we can live out the love of God in a more meaningful and a more efficient and effective way. So here's some recommendations for some rhythms you can employ in your life. A daily rhythm would be incorporating some kind of breath prayer into your life, journaling, writing down some. Remember, we talked about gratitude a few weeks ago. The most meaningful way to experience gratitude is actually to write about and to ruminate on a way that you've received gratitude, not just what you're grateful for, but also ways that you've received gratitude. Putting in a practice of meditation or prayer. And then I'm going to recommend this, and I know this is insane. To some of you, this is completely impossible, but to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep at night. If you got 7 to 8 hours of sleep at night 5 days a week, that could completely change the game for you. Some of you have new babies, and you're laughing at me right now. Some of you are pregnant, and you're laughing at me right now. Some of you have maybe a sleep disorder or an anxiety disorder or something, and you're like, yeah, right, there's no way I could do that. I realize that I'm making a very general recommendation and statement, and these things can be very difficult to actually pull off. But if you pursued progress and improvement in these things, it will lay a healthier foundation for you to continue to live out the love of God in a more meaningful, efficient, and effective way. On a weekly basis, we hope that this continues to be a gift of rest and peace to you. I recommend using this as a downbeat. Our family does. It's 30 minutes of free childcare, and it's a chance for us to get out of the chaos of home or work or whatever and just be in a space where like the lights are a little bit low and there's not a ton of noise coming at us. And it's vital. It's been vital for us. And we figured that out when we were on sabbatical and we didn't have it. And we came back to it, and it just felt like we were letting our breath out again. Like we had been holding it, just a little bit for that time. This felt like a gift to come back to this. And I hope that it's that for you too on a weekly basis. Quarterly, develop some kind of seasonally specific activity, trip, or experience. So something specific to the literal season of the calendar, summer, fall, winter, spring, right? So in the summer, if it's like it's too hot, find a way to get in some water. In the fall, go look at the foliage or whatever. In the winter, ski if you can afford it, sled if you can't. Like, that's us. We sled. We don't ski. Spring, whatever. I don't know, whatever it is, but like find something that sort of fits that pattern and that rhythm and do that on a regular basis, quarterly. And then annually, I recommend a retreat with friends or solo. You don't need someone to plan a retreat for you in order for you to go on a retreat, okay? I think a lot of people are waiting for like a guru or a pastor or somebody to like, we got to plan this retreat, we got to do this thing now. Go on a retreat. You can rent a house, or you can sleep in a tent, or you can, whatever you need to do to get away and to get out. I'm doing it this next weekend. This group of friends of mine and I have rented a house for the last like 10 years or something like that to get away. And there is some intentional time, but a lot of it's just like we're together. We live all over the country now, and we're getting the chance to reconnect with each other and to be in a restful, peaceful environment. Nobody's planning. I mean, we're planning it. It's just a bunch of dudes like sharing grocery costs and the cost of this house together. And it's been such a gift, and it's something that I've made a priority for the last few years, especially. I highly recommend building some sort of rhythm of retreat into your life with friends or solo, if that's more important to you. Sometimes the most spiritual thing that you can do is take a nap. I'm just going to pass along the advice of my friend Pete to all of you. And remember that is sometimes getting physical rest is some of the best ways for you to experience the love of God in a unique way, but also in a way that you're filled up and you can give it away. When you have it, you can give it. And some of us are so exhausted, we don't feel like we're even experiencing that. What starts as a rhythm of rest, where we're putting these things into our life, can eventually become sort of like an ambiance of rest. We become people of peace. When we start to experience rest ourselves, they gravitate towards us because they go, that's the sort of person, when they walk into a room, they don't bring anxiety and they don't bring exhaustion and they don't bring this like intensity that I don't know what to do with. This person brings peace into the room. What if that became true of us? Characteristic of our church, when we walk into a room, we bring peace with us. I would love for that to be true of us. It starts with a rhythm, a dedicated rhythm. And then it becomes, again, this ambiance that we take on. Let's pray together. God, thanks for sending your Son and for the words of Jesus over us. Words of peace, words of lightness, not heaviness. Words of rest. God, we thank you for that. I pray, God, that our church would continue to be a place of rest where when people gather here, they experience rest, but also that we would be bearers of peace in our community. And as we go from here, that we would take this peace that we've experienced here with us and we would give it away. We thank you, God, for this time together. And we pray these things in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.